Very good. Several things, and then we'll answer some questions. Today's topic for the teleclass is profitability for commercial composters. I think that's a pretty critical thing. I'm going to go through some bullet points. I do think that these pieces are pretty valuable in making this all work. If you look at it from a big picture point of view, all of those factors are impacting the final profitability. And I feel like this has not been talked enough about. There's quite a bit more that sessions that we will be going through that is just going to be a continued series on this. But let me just start in by the factors that impact profitability. There are many people out there getting into composting, but how many really are making money? And I would like to factor in those factors that really have made a difference. As I think about this aspect, and I appreciate you all coming on this call, as I think about how this all is impacted, we're going to go through the different factors relatively quickly, one at a time. So the first one is about throughput. And if you look at the different things about throughput, that's a pretty important factor of making that. And so let me just give you the first three. The second one is cost or revenue of incoming material, and the third is processing cost. Now, I have a few more, but I kind of want to do that just up front to have a start with this whole thing. So if I can get my slides to move here. So where we're looking at, when we're looking at these sides, I'm going to start talking about throughput. Now, throughput is influenced by reactivity of the materials in the windrows. This comes from CN ratios, from fast reacting materials versus low reacting materials, moisture management. There's a lot of people that think they can put moisture on the outside or let it rain on, but I'm talking about moisture into the interior of a small organic material particle. Like, just imagine, if you would, a piece of grass or a piece of straw or a piece of how shall I say it, of woody material. Until the inside of that piece is wet and moist, you will not have those cells busting open and composting at it. And so if you look at it, this throughput is all factored in here. First of all, reactivity of materials, as I said earlier, moisture management, the ability to handle every particle of material, the porosity or open pore space in the composting windrows. I'm talking about where the air and the moisture can pass throughout the windrow. And then the size of the windrows. Those are all factors that make a big difference. And I will go through each one a little slower, but I just feel like this is so impactful that many people miss this. For example, reactivity of materials. There are certain materials that break down slowly. Typically, this is a rule of thumb. You are composting what used to grow. And so if something grew slowly, it will probably absorb moisture more slowly and probably decompose more slowly. If it absorbs, if it grew fast or absorbs moisture fast, either one, it probably will decompose fast. And so you have to factor in what you are composting. And then on the moisture management, folks, we want to impact the moisture when the material is flying in the air so that we can handle every different particle. We have 30 different angles from our moisture point of view, so we can truly touch and impact every particle. That is so critical. Then the ability to handle every particle of material. Again, most people don't realize the fact is when it goes up in the air, it needs to be separating from each other so that you can impact the oxygen, the moisture, the CO2 exchange, the different ability to mix match every little tiny particle, and I'm talking extremely microscopic small particles that you mix up so that it continues reacting. And then the porosity. We often, right behind the machine, as soon as it's safe, we'll go up to the windrow and we will push on it and watch to see if up the windrow and down from where you're standing in the windrow, out to 5 to 10 feet out there, if you kind of push on the windrow peak, jiggling it back and forth, it'll jiggle all the way from 5 to 10 feet away from you, each side of you. And so that's about porosity. And then the size of windrows. There's no way in the world that how shall I say this, that a very large windrow of 30 feet wide or wider has enough action going on in the center of the windrow. And if nothing happens in the center, even if the outside does decompose, you still can't move that material off your pad until the entire windrow is decomposed and properly. Now let me talk about compost just a bit because throughput is all in this context. I want to make sure the premise and context are set up for you. Compost is something that is opposite of growing. Compose, C-O-M-P-O-S-E. I'm going to repeat that. Compose is spelled C-O-M-P-O-S-E. That is coming together. That's talking about growing. So anything that is organic used to grow, that's composing. But when we talk about compost instead of compose, we take off the E and we put on the T, and now we're reverse that growing. And so when we're managing them for profitability, we recognize we are using materials that really end up becoming very, very powerful. If you know these principles, it becomes very powerful for you because you are reversing what used to grow. So let me go to the next step, which is about the cost or revenue of incoming materials or feedstocks. Depending on end goal final quality compost, you may want to purchase materials or feedstocks as well as receive tipping fees for organic waste. Again, depending on the final quality. Let's say that you're making a fairly low quality. All you want to do is get the waste stream so it's acceptable to apply on the soil. Then by far you are going to want to focus on just the tipping fee operation because you will not make a lot of money on the end product. You're just going to get it out there. Some cases it will sell for very little. In other cases you may get substantial amounts, but in the end it's all in that range from $0 to perhaps 10 or 20 or even $30 a ton in some cases. And we have a broad scope of this since we have been doing this in 31 different countries over the last 30 years. In the final thing to remember is that the final quality is where you can contribute most of your income. Why do I say that? Well, first of all, you shrink a lot of material. It's what you sell of that solid material, that's what you really can bank on. Second of all, if you are using tipping fees, yes, that's a very good income, but just be sure that it contributes to your final quality that you want. For example, if you're getting reasonable tipping fees from a product, but it's keeping you from getting $100 for a ton for your compost, or $220 as we do, or some of our customers are up to $270 a ton. Those things that you have got to be very, very careful. Do not use materials that sacrifice your top end. Again, this is all about being profitable. And again, that depends on your your goals, what you want to do on your operations. But please understand, it's the cost of feedstocks or the revenue of the incoming material or feedstocks that has another factor in giving you your final income. Let me go to the third one. processing costs, pretty extensive. Incoming trucking / hauling costs, that's one. Compost turner, that's another. The compost turner operations costs, that's another one. There are compost turners that cost a lot per ton to turn, and there are others that do not cost much at all. And there's a big misconception out there on what that really is all about. And so we could talk more about that, but that is one of the things that we focus on, is to show people that, look, in 5 years, composting 20,000 tons a year, which is a total of 100,000 tons, could cost you as much as $250,000 more than what the Aeromaster turner costs in that 5-year time frame. Well, that really wakes people up, because all of a sudden they say, I don't have to just worry about the purchase price. You mean I have to worry, is it that much difference about what it costs to operate it? Answer is a solid yes. Loader costs. All operations have loaders, and we get it. That's necessary. But moving materials using loaders, or moving materials using trailers, or moving materials less, all are factors in making so the loader costs are not a high contributor to your final product costs. There are many, many people that talk about shrinkage and cost and actual operations costs of a front-end loader. It just ends up being close to that $1 a ton cost, or a cubic yard in some cases, depending on what size loader you got. So windrow building costs, that is often our customers' biggest cost, even though they think it's the compost turner operations cost. No, there's a lot of our customers that really the biggest cost is building the windrows. Then, of course, screening costs if you have that, and then outgoing or trucking / hauling costs. Those are all factors. And then we've got some additional factors. The shrinkage that you allow, the value add of the final product, I alluded to that, the complementary products that are sold with your compost, and the marketing, education of value of the final products that you do sell. In other words, create a demand for what you have, and make sure that you can demonstrate more than enough value of what you sell. For example, anybody is willing to pay $270 a ton for something that makes them 500 back. Well, I shouldn't say anyone, but most people do see return on investment if it can be demonstrated year after year, where the soils get looser and the buffering factors of adverse weather get easier. Then all of a sudden the value of this goes up dramatically. It's so interesting to me that people can pay over $1,000 per ton for nitrogen or phosphorus or potassium, when in fact 10 years ago you'd have said that's just not doable, that's just not possible. But they'll do it, but yet they won't pay 1/4 of that, $250 plus, for a humus compost that can dramatically lower the need for as much N, P, and K, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, that all cost so many more dollars per ton than what they used to be. And so there's a factor there that we need to work with. And as we look at this whole thing, it's just simply this, that when you start down this path of those final 4 things I gave you, allowed shrinkage, value add of final product, and then other products that are complementary, that are sold with your compost, and then the marketing / educational value. This includes testing and so on. So if I look at all of those factors, why did I start with allowed shrinkage? Well, we've discovered that you can have up to 50% more shrinkage if you just don't focus on it. You can, in fact, you can have your shrinkage be less than half of what normal is if you really pay attention to it. So those are all important factors. And then you got the value add of a final product. And that's really an interesting thing as well, because do you have the product, for example, that that is just regular compost. We kind of categorize it in three main products. One of them is the regular compost, the supercharged compost, and the humus compost. Well, each one of those is a notch up in value. And so we can really look at that and make this all work. And then there's products that really go well with your final product. That's what we call the complementary products sold with your compost. Then, of course, that marketing/education of value-added final products, you have got to be able to support that. Someone does. Whether you do or someone else, you're creating a demand for your products. And that is a real key of what ends up becoming what we would call success from this point of view. And this is a big factor in making this all work. And so as I review in looking at what I have talked about, there are so many operations that focus on, well, all right, I've got to buy a turner. And what turner am I going to get by with? I think I won't have a turner. I think I'll just go with aerated windrow composting, for example, static aerated or just simply aerated. Or I'm just going to put them in piles. It'll eventually become dirt. And here again, if they do that, one thing sure, their throughput is down. And this is one of those factors to make profit. When the material comes in and the sooner it leaves, the sooner you turn that over and experience a profit from that material. And so if you look at that, looking at throughput, that is such a big deal, because I'm talking the difference from, depending on your quality of regular compost, which could be in 3 to 5 weeks, or supercharged product compost, which would take at least 5 to 7 weeks, or humus compost, which takes 10 to 12 months or 10 to 12 weeks or 3 months. And if you look at those factors, if you take anything like that and extend it 50% longer, that slows down your profitability because it slows down your throughput the exact same percentage. And throughput is really key. I know that the retail market in any industry all focuses on throughput. Guys, the compost operation has to do the same. There are so many factors, and I'd like to give you a story to really bring this out. At one point, we were at a very large composting annual conference. And in that conference, there was somebody towards the last that raised their hand and said, how many people in here are making money at their composting operation, or are they just getting rid of a problem? And so anyone in here that's making money, and so nobody says anything, no hand raises, in person, all of a sudden, one brave soul stands up and says, well, from the side of where I come from what I have watched, these folks at Midwest BioSystems has factored down all those factors of making this happen. So from a profitability point of view, they have zoned in on what it takes to make this very profitable. Here again, I often tongue-in-cheek, but have a little fun. I like humor, and I often say, look, we sell money printing machines. And they say, what? Yes. It doesn't actually print it directly, but it adds value. And if we can have that added value for the soil, for the growers, farmers/growers, doesn't matter to me if it's in the sports turf industry, whether it's in the horticultural industry, whether it's in fighting diseases in vegetable crops, whether it's in corn and soybean crops, grazing, etc., and we are involved in all of those, we can make a huge difference by knowing what we want with our final end quality. And how do we do that? Well, we've learned on the top end of the quality, we can harvest more sun and deliver it directly in a protein to the soil and plants the following year. And if you can take last year's sun energy directly, crank it into a protein, and deliver it to your next year's crops, you've got stuff that regular compost can never achieve. never achieve. I'll give you one last example. We had a customer that had red sticky clay soils. He was using regular compost for had 16 years of application until he started using humus compost. I was out there on the 16th year, and there had been a small rain event, very small. It was only like 2 to 3 tenths of an inch. And if you look at what happened, that 2 to 3 tenths of an inch of rain made that soil very, very sticky. And I said, I'm surprised. You've used compost for how many years? And he said, 16 years. Well, I said, this soil doesn't have very good structure. And they said, well, you got to remember, this is red, sticky clay soil. We don't see it any different than this, ever. And yes, it just rained 2 or 3 tenths, but it always gets sticky. We've got to wait until the stickiness goes away before we can get back in. And I looked at them and I says, well, the way I see it, porosity in the soil has to happen. Some people call it soil structure, and that's fine. But I'm talking about the open space for air and water to move in the soil. Talking about the ability to dig down into the soil by hand, that kind of stuff of nice, soft soil. And so 2 years of humus compost in the middle of August, 2 years later, they had a rain event of 8.5 inches in one day. Came in a couple, 3, 4 hours. Most of it came, not quite all of it, but at least 85% of it came in that time frame. The following day, we were able to walk out in the field, hardly have any mud on our shoes, and it was not sticky, but we were able to dig down 6 inches deep and grab a handful of granulated soil that looked like sugar granuled soil. And this is what used to be red clay sticky soils. And they said to me, so that's what you're talking about. And I said, yes, it is. And so these successes that can come from the growing environment using your final product are what make your successful operation really thrive. And folks, just as a way of finishing off here, and I'll go to questions next, I would like to just make this comment. We really want you to know we came from the soil first into composting, not because we had something to get rid of or we had excess waste. We just got into composting because we wanted to make sure that we had the products we needed to make the biggest change in the soil. We were looking something that we needed for the soil. We were not looking to get rid of something. Now, that doesn't mean somebody is going down the wrong track if they're trying to get rid of something. Don't get me wrong, but it has given us the advantage of what does it take to become very profitable as a farmer, as a grower, as achiever of all kinds of trouble and trauma out there, such as insect issues, such as disease resistance, the susceptibility to more weeds or less weeds. All of those things are where we came from first, and then figured out how to create a product that helped with that. And so that got us into composting, and yes, we manufacture AeroMaster compost turners, and yes, we consider that as a tool, but at the end of the day, our focal point is to help our growers become more successful by helping commercial composters becoming more profitable and helping their customers be more successful. And so with that, I will switch to a question and answer mode. If I could entertain some. Kelly, would you be able to open that up, and we'll entertain some questions next? Anyone? Well, maybe we don't have any questions. I'm not sure. I would be happy to entertain some if there are, but I'm not insisting if there are not. Okay, that's fine. I guess that I've caused some deep thought. Yes, if there's someone that's speaking up right now, I didn't mean to interfere. So with that, Kelly, I think then that's good. That's excellent. Anyone who's wanting to ask privately, you're more than welcome to call into our office at 815-438-7200 or email us at info@midwestbiosystems.com, and we'd be happy to entertain any questions. So I think that's all I have for now. Thank you.